to the beautiful village of Dutton, here in the heart of Bolton. I'm Marion Dutton and this is MazArt Studio. Thanks for joining me again today. Got an absolutely beautiful painting. This one is for all the floral lovers out there. It's a real sugar-coated floral painting. A lot of fun to do, and I think you're really going to enjoy this one. So the colours we'll be using for today, we've got some titanium white, cadmium yellow, cadmium orange, some alizarin crimson, sap green, ultramarine blue, cerulean blue and some mauve. We have a container of linseed oil, and the brushes that we will be using, I have a couple of mops. These are both the same, but one's large and one's small. A little round brush, and that'll be using for some sketching. 1-inch bristle brush, a liner brush. This one is an old warm brush which I'll be using to scrub in some colour, which you'll see later on when we block in the flowers. And then I have a flat, this is a 1/2-inch flat. It's got a nice chisel, it's a synthetic, and it's got a nice chisel edge on it, and that's very important when you come to do the roses. We also have some kitchen towels, because we'll certainly be using plenty of those. So I'm using a 16 by 20 inch canvas, and I've already pre-prepared this. What I've used is some white gesso, which I've tinted with some phthalo blue. Now phthalo blue is a very, very powerful colour, and it will go very sort of candy coloured on you quickly. So just to tone that down, I've added a very slight amount of burnt sienna. So that's white gesso, phthalo blue, burnt sienna, and then I've literally covered the entire canvas in that. That's an acrylic primer. Now that is fully dried. So we'll now begin, start with some sketching. So I'm switching to a round brush, and I'm going to dip that into the oil, and a little bit of the ultramarine blue and the cerulean blue. Now everybody usually freaks out at this point because we're talking about sketching, but really it's a really, really simple thing to do. So I'm going to use my hand to get sort of a placement for where I want the teapot to go. So I'm looking at something like about there. Now all you need to worry about is simple shapes, and this teapot is just a triangle. Something like that. Now if you don't like anything, it's very, very easy to switch to your 1-inch brush and just rub that out. You can add a little touch of oil as well, and that'll help rub it out even further. So I'm going to put that back in now. And then for the handle, just a round shape. This is just a guide for me at the moment, so there's no major detail here at all. And then the spout, and we'll just flatten that off at the top. So not complicated at all. Now for the teapot lid, I'm using an old lid, just anything that's circular, just to use as a template. So back to the blue mix that's been thinned, and I'll position my lid about here. And then I've got a smaller circular template, and I'm going to put that right in the centre, and this is going to be for the little round handle. Simple. So I'm going to cover the rest of the area. In fact, no, sorry, I will go back and I'm just going to lightly sketch in where I want the placement of these roses. So we'll have one there, we'll have one slightly to the side there, and another one here. Now I'm not worrying about the one at the bottom, we'll add that in at the end. Now switching to the 1-inch brush, I'm going to cover all the remaining area with a little bit of this linseed oil. Now I'm avoiding the flowers, this centre area here and the teapot. I'm just going to scrub this oil, and this will lubricate the canvas so that when we come to put some background colours in, it will blend nice and easily, and it'll just make this canvas nice and slick. So it is a thin coat, and if you've seen these wet on wet paintings before, you'll know that it is a very, very thin coat, and we wipe away the excess oil. Now I'm going in between the handle as well. I'm not worrying about the drawing, as long as I can still see it, that's all that matters. Cover the bottom area where the table will be. I'm really scrubbing that now into the weave of the canvas. And then we'll take a kitchen towel and we'll very carefully just wipe away the excess. We're looking for a nice sheen on the canvas. You don't want too much oil on here. We're going to begin by tinting the background now, and I'm going to use mix a nice pink using some titanium white and a little bit of the alizarin crimson. Now to tone that down, because that's a very candy colour, I'm going to add the least amount of the cadmium yellow, and that just sort of tones down that pink. So I'm going to notice how I'm just sort of loading the bristles of the brush, the edge of the brush, tap that through for a nice even distribution. And I'm tinting this background now with this pink. Using this extra, I'm going to go, like I said, I'm not worrying about the drawing. I can see clearly where my drawing is. And I'm just going to put on this pink background. Just tap that through a little bit more. Under the handle area. Now I'm not looking to get rid of all of the blue, just to tint in some of this colour, but I still want some of that blue peeking through. Now I'm going to add a little bit of the mauve, just a small amount, a little bit more of the white, and that's just to add in a little bit of different flavour in this background, just to add some interest. And I haven't cleaned my brush at all. Now I'm going to wipe off that excess. And I'm going to soften these strokes up. Now this is the same stroke, but it's slightly lighter pressure. And that then just blends what you've got on there. Now I'm loving all the fact that there's different movement in there and it's not one flat colour. So I'm very lightly just blending that out, but without trying to lose all that movement. And see how I've left some of this pink, some of the blue peeking through the pink. And then finally I'm going to switch to the soft blending brush and very lightly now just going to feather these edges so you can't see where the pink ends and the blue begins. Now the tabletop is added very, very simply. I'm going to go into some titanium white, a little bit of cerulean blue, a little touch of the ultramarine blue. Again, now I haven't cleaned the brush from the pink because we're going a bit darker, it really doesn't matter. Again, I'm loading the brush exactly the same way and just tapping that through for a nice even distribution. And I'm going to go straight across. Now hold on to your canvases, you need quite a firm pressure. A little bit more paint on this side. Now as the paint starts to blend, I'm going to start working toward the teapot. Always keeping the strokes horizontal, that is important. So otherwise your table will look like it's tipping. So I'm just stroking this back and forth. Then I'm going over the teapot. I'm not losing my drawing at all, but I'd rather keep my strokes nice and horizontal. Now into some titanium white. Let's have a little bit of a highlight right on this edge. And then the same movement back and forth. And this gives the illusion of the table rounding over. And then we'll start to work back and forth. Now I'm just going to switch to the old flat brush that I've got, and I'm going to put a little bit of a shadow underneath. And that's ultramarine blue and the cerulean. Have some of that lighter colour in there. And I'm going to create a little bit of a shadow right underneath this rolled top. Now I'm going to add just a little bit of alizarin to that because that will give it a little bit of a purple colour to it, which looks nice as a shadow. Now exactly the same as you did before, I'm just wiping that excess. I'm going to work this colour just downwards. I want to soften, I want to keep that edge fairly sharp, but I want to soften the bottom part of this edge out to give the illusion of a shadow. Now I'm going to switch back to the bristle brush and we'll soften the whole of this area out. And I'm just going to add just a little bit more of a highlight right in this centre area. And then lightly soften that up. That's a simple way to add a table. So we're going to put a little bit of a shadow where our teapot is sitting down on the table. And again, I'm going into this sort of blue, alizarin, ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, and a little touch of the alizarin to give it a slight purplish tint. And we'll add a shadow. Now the light is coming from the right hand side. So I'm going to add a dark shadow underneath this teapot and around underneath this area as well. Now I'm thinking that the spout might be reflecting a little bit or causing a shadow on the table here. So I'm just scrubbing that in very lightly. Now that looks rough at the moment, but it'll all sort of soften up when we blend it a little bit with the blending brush. So just fan that out. Again, keep your shadows flat. You don't want your shadows looking as though they're tilting. So keep your shadows nice and horizontal. And then I'll switch to a soft blending brush and we'll just soften those edges. Get rid of the harsh brush strokes. And that just sits this teapot down onto the table. So we're now going to begin to block in this teapot. So for that I'm using some cerulean blue and some titanium white. And this is going to be our middle value. And I'm adding a little touch of that oil to that. Not too much, but enough that there isn't much resistance under your brush. Now I've switched again to this old warm brush because we will be just scrubbing this colour all over. Now this is colouring book style, nothing fancy, we're just blocking this in. Little drop of oil just so there's no resistance. Now I'm not worrying about the top of this teapot because that'll be all hidden with all the foliage. You just scrub that colour on there, and this is why you want to be using one of your old warm brushes. Now I'm going to add just a little bit of dark around this outside edge so that I don't lose where this teapot lid starts. We'll just block that all in now. And we'll do the same with the spout. So this is just colouring book style. We're just filling it in. A little bit of the oil again because I can feel this thickening up a little bit on me. And then the handle, easily done with the flat of the brush. Again, there's no light and shadow on this, this is just a blocking in stage. And then we'll do the same with the teapot lid. We're just blocking this in the same colour. Now again, I'm just going to darken that outside edge just so that I don't lose that as I'm filling this in. Just fill that in the centre, so it's just one flat colour. So we're going to begin adding some shadows now, and for that I'm just using some of the ultramarine blue and a little touch of that cerulean blue. Now there's a strong shadow on this side. I'm just placing these colours in for now and then we'll soften the edges. And there's a shadow here. And there's also a shadow inside. Now we will be adding a highlight on that, but we get that dark in there first of all. There's a shadow to this side. So notice I'm just placing these colours on here. And there's also a shadow that comes underneath the handle. And you can see now how this is starting to really create the form. There's a shadow on this side, and there's a shadow as this little lid is touching the teapot. That's creating a shadow as well. There'll be a little bit of a shadow at the bottom, and also there'll be some shadow underneath this flower. So I'll get those shadows in and I'll just wipe that excess paint away, and then I'll very lightly just soften those edges. Now I'm going to clean the brush entirely because we're switching to some titanium white, and we're going to begin adding in the highlights. Now the light again is coming from this right hand side, so I'm going to add that lighter colour in there, lightly just blend that out. Now I'm not looking to cover all the blue, I want some of this sort of middle colour coming through. There's a light on this side coming down here. Again, I'll place that in and then I'll just soften that out. Just add a little bit more light into this area here. Stronger light source. Now I'm going to switch now to the chiseled brush, the chisel flat brush, so that I can get a little bit more detail in here. We've got some light hitting the top of this teapot. And then we've got a little bit of some light on this outer edge of the handle. So once I've kind of got the positions of my light and shadow, I'll then start creating the form. So I've wiped away the excess paint off the brush, and I'm very lightly going to go backwards and forwards. There's a slight dip as I'm following the contour of the pot. And then I'm going to switch then to the soft blending brush, and we'll just remove those excess brush strokes. Hopefully you can see now how that's created the sort of roundness. Now I do want to re-emphasise that highlight in the centre, so I'm going to go in and put a stronger light in there, and then just lightly go back to softening that off, and then I'll blend the rest of this out as well. Let's just strengthen that up just a little bit more. And lightly soften that handle. So we want to do the same with the lid now, is add some light and shadow. So we'll go back to our dark mix with the ultramarine blue and cerulean blue. Add a little bit of shadow to the left side. And also a little bit of shadow on the left side of this little handle. Now again, we'll blend that out nice and soft. Keep our strokes nice and soft. And then I'm going to go back to the chiseled edge brush and we'll add in a little bit of highlight. There's going to be a strong highlight on that top edge, and there'll be some light catching on this side. So back to softening. And just soften that edge out. I'm just going to re-emphasise the shadow around this top, this little handle. And I'm using the chiselled edge of the brush for that now, and that gives you a nice sharp line. I'll switch to the old warm brush. I want to keep the edge nice and hard on this side, but this outer side I do want to soften. So I'm just lightly going to soften those edges, because that's a shadow, and all edges for shadows, you don't want them to be hard. And we will just re-emphasise again just where this is joining and touching this teapot. Just soften that out a little bit. Okay, so we're ready to start adding those polka dots. So to add the polka dots, I'm going to take some titanium white. Now if you've watched my videos before, you'll know I like to kind of get my motor going onto the canvas, onto the palette first before I go up to the canvas. And then we'll take that up to the canvas. And we'll start with the lighter areas while the paint is nice and bright on your finger. And we're just going to touch these onto the teapot. Now as this starts to fade and mix with the other colour, you want to be going into the slightly shadowed areas. So I'll reload, and we'll add some of the ones onto the little lid. And a couple on this spout. And then we'll take the soft blending brush, and very, very lightly now, you just want to soften the edges of these. All I'm doing really is just touching them very, very lightly, and that's just to take away some of that excess paint. This also sits them down really into the paint underneath. Just touch that one again. So I'm just tapping those in. Now how easy was that? We're going to begin adding the foliage, but first of all I want to add a little bit of a sketch where I want some lilacs to be. So I'm just thinning down a little bit of mauve, and I'm going to place these lilacs something like that. And it's just so that I can avoid that area when I add my darker colours in. So now I'm switching to the flat brush, and I'm going to use some oil with some sap green and some ultramarine blue. I'm looking for a really nice dark green. Now I'm adding enough oil that this becomes a little bit slick on the brush, and we'll block in this darker area. And I'm using this X stroke. So it's just putting in some darks around this foliage, around the flowers. Pop some around here. And I'll just wipe that excess away, and I'll just fan this out into the background, keeping these strokes nice and choppy. And this is just going to suggest some foliage. Now I'm going to switch to this cerulean blue mix and some white. A little touch of the sap green in there. I'm just going to wipe that excess away, and I want to create some sort of like distant, like ghost leaves almost, with a slightly lighter value. Just a little drop of oil. And we'll do the same on this side. And then I'll begin to create some leaves. Press down, and some of these will get covered with the darker foliage. but it is nice to have some of these sort of ghosty leaves in there. A little bit more of the blue. We'll have some coming round here. So I'll just show you that nice and slowly. I'm pressing or wiggling and lifting up to a chisel. And then all my strokes then will be directed to this base of this leaf. I may add some of this pink. I think that might look nice, just a little bit of the pink. I haven't cleaned the brush, but again it's just for a little bit of a different flavour. So it's mixing with that green. Put a few smaller ones up here. This just adds a little bit of depth to the painting because you've got these small sort of distant leaves and distant stuff happening in the background. Now at this point I'm just touching the canvas, create some just suggestions of foliage. Just keeping those edges nice and soft. So I'm going to begin increasing the value now. So I'm going back into this mixture of sap green and ultramarine blue and some oil. You're looking for a nice creamy mix now so this flows nice and smooth off your brush. Now it is important that you get a nice chiseled edge to the brush because that will help you form these leaves. So I'm going to begin increasing the value now and pushing these lighter areas back. So again, I'll run this through nice and slow. I'll wiggle up to a chiseled edge. Now I'll do you a little triangle just so that you can kind of get an idea. So we fill in the centre of the triangle and then all our strokes then are aimed to this base. So from the shoulder of the kite, if you like, and then you just flick in your strokes, always aiming your stroke to this corner, and then the same on the other side. And then you'll put your vein in. So that was just slowing it all down for you. As you get better at these, you won't need to sort of put those little guidelines in, but if it helps, put them in. So we'll bring a couple of darker leaves out in front. You see now how that has pushed the ones behind it to the back. One here. So I'm just looking now for a nice pleasing composition, a nice balance to the eye. And it is nice when you overlap, allow things to overlap. And we'll have a slightly darker one coming out this way. And that's fine if you're covering some of the ones that you've done in the background. No, I think that's probably enough. We will highlight those in a little while, but for now we'll move on to adding the flowers. I'll start with the lilacs, and for that I'm going to use some of the mauve. And a little touch of the titanium white. Now you want to add enough oil that this is quite a creamy mix. And then we'll just scrub this colour in. And it's okay to go over and pull in some of the green. Just add a little bit more of that mauve to that. So I'm just scrubbing this colour in. This is just blocking these flowers in now. Now I'm going to put a little bit of white to suggest where the light is actually coming from. Just wipe that excess out and I'll just feather that in now. Now, I forgot to mention earlier that we needed a little bit of ivory black because we're going to mix a grey. So I'm using some titanium white and just a little touch of this ivory black to make a nice grey. And this is going to be for blocking in the white flower. Now I'm going to tint that slightly with a little bit of, let's add a little bit of that cerulean blue. So it's a bluish grey. And then again, enough oil so this is nice and creamy. So I'm going to scrub this in now to this bottom flower. Again, I'm wanting to pull in some of this colour from the green. This all adds to the transparency. So just scrubbing that colour in. Now this one will have as a pink flower, so I'm going to use some titanium white and some of the alizarin crimson. And again, enough oil to make this nice and creamy. And we'll scrub this one in. So this is just the blocking in stage. Add a little bit more of that alizarin to that, make it just a little bit darker, a little bit pinker. So I'm just blocking these in. I'm looking for a nice raggedy edge. I mean, you could have these any colour you wanted. And then this top one we'll have with some cadmium orange. Now I haven't cleaned the brush at all. And some white. And we'll have this one as a nice peachy coloured one. Then just for a little bit of a different flavour really. So I'm pulling this colour out, I'm pulling the green into the flower. This gives you a nice automatic shadow right at the bottom. Scrubbing this in and looking for that nice ragged edge. So we're going to begin adding the centres into these. Now for this white one, I'm going to use a nice bright yellow, so that's cadmium yellow. Now I'm using this dry, there is no medium added. And I'm going to create a little bit of a lazy V. Wipe away that excess, and then we'll fan that out into the direction. Now going back to the dark mix of the grey that I made earlier, which is just titanium white, I added a little bit of that cerulean into that. I'm going to create a little bit of a darker area at the bottom, and I'm just fanning that out. Add a little touch more black into that. Now I'll wipe the brush and we'll begin to add the centres for that. Now for those I'm just going to use alizarin crimson. Again, very, very dry. Lazy V. Now there's a little bit of orange in that, that's okay, it's not a problem. Fan that out. And then we'll create a little bit of a, this is where the cup is and the skirts of the rose all sit. We'll dot in some of that dark area and then I just fan that out. And we'll do the same with the this peach one. We're using alizarin crimson, nice and dry. Fanning that out. And then just put a little bit of a dark under the cup of the rose. Okay, so I've got you down on the palette now because I want to really explain the consistency of the paint when we do these petals. So I'm taking some titanium white, and we're doing the peach one first. I'm going to add some of the orange. Now you never want to go too bright too quickly. Now as I'm pulling on there, I can feel some resistance, and that's not what you want. You want to add enough of the oil into your consistency so that you've got a creamy mix. And a little bit more. Now all the time I am stroking this brush because I'm grooming the brush to a lovely sharp chiseled edge, and this is very, very important when you're doing these petals. So a little bit more oil, so you're looking for a nice creamy mixture. So each time you see me go down to the palette, I'm looking for this nice creamy mix. Add a little bit more of that orange to that. If you can stay away from going too bright too quickly, that will be your best bet. Now you can wiggle your brush in, and that will bring it to a nice sharp chisel. Now we're ready to begin with the petals. Right, I'm going to begin very lightly sketching this back petal in, and I want to really explain the stroke needed. So you right up onto a 90-degree angle. All my strokes are aiming for this bottom area to go into the flower, and your first stroke will come towards the left. Your middle stroke will come dead centre, and your next stroke will come towards the right. So I'll show you that. Onto the chiselled edge, around, flick and lift off. Now the next stroke is much straighter, and it's overlapping the other one ever so slightly. Straight down, and then the third stroke, to create the petal, curves towards the right. So I'll just hit that again so you can see that. And that's how you form that shape of the petal. Now if it helps, sketch in the other petals. Very lightly. And again, notice how all the strokes are going towards that centre. So I'll put another row of these in. Now I don't as normally sketch these in, but again, if you need to, that's fine. So we've got the back petals in. We're now looking at getting these foreshortened petals in. And these are very, very simply on the chiselled edge. I'll touch and lift off. Touch and lift off. Now I do that quite quickly, and that creates the foreshortened petals. Now we'll start getting in some of these skirts. Notice now that I'm aiming again towards the centre of the flower. There's a slight curve to the stroke. We'll have another petal here. Again, I'm deciding where the centre of that particular petal is, and we're aiming all the strokes all the time to the centre of that petal. And it's okay to bring in some of that, you know, to go over some of this dark green, because that adds to the transparency of the flower. We'll pop in another little layer there. Okay, Now you can highlight them, but I'm just adding a little touch of white to the peach mix. I don't want to go too bright, because again, if you go too light, you will lose that transparency. Your flowers will look too heavy. So it is important that you avoid going too light too quick. And just pop in a few little extra highlights. Okay, we'll move on to do the pink rose. Okay, so we are loading up now with some titanium white and some of the alizarin crimson. Ready for this pink rose. Again, the same consistency. You're looking that there is no resistance under your brush, and you're grooming the brush all the time to form a nice chiseled edge. Okay. So again, notice the strokes, the direction of those strokes. Always to that centre. We'll get the foreshortened petals in. And then we'll look at getting these skirts in. So again, always aiming for that centre. And not being worried about going over some of that greenery. We can stick another one in here, I think, a couple of little foreshortened ones here. And I'll just increase the brightness a little bit to make one or two of these petals now stand out. Notice how each of those strokes overlap, and we'll put another little row on the inside. Okay, we'll move on and do the white one. We will use some titanium white, and I'm going to add the least amount of black to that just to tone that white down a little bit. Remember, we never want to use our brightest colour straight away. And again, enough oil that this is a nice creamy mix. Now I did clean my brush and got rid of all the pink off the brush. And it's okay to overlap the petals above. Notice how that petal is created by those 3 strokes. We'll get these foreshortened ones. We'll create one that's slightly folded over. And that is the centre there. So all the time I'm reloading to form a nice chiselled edge. And then we'll put this final one in here. Now I'm going to some titanium white now, and just to highlight 1 or 2 little areas at this folded over edge. just to make them stand out just a little bit more. Okay, to add the centres, we're switching to a round brush and some alizarin crimson with a little bit of oil to make it come off your brush nice and easy. And we will just tap in. I'll do all these together because it's a nice simple step. It really finishes these flowers off. Wipe the brush and then some cadmium yellow. Again, a little bit of oil that this just flows right off the brush. And then we'll finish, I'll just clean that yellow out, and we'll finish with a little bit of titanium white. Again, just that little bit of oil. And it really, really makes these flowers sparkle. Okay, so we'll move on now to this lilac, and for that I'm switching to a filbert brush, and the nice round edge for this is perfect for doing these little flowers. So some titanium white and a little touch of the mauve. And again, a little bit of oil now to make this nice and creamy. And it's a 4 strokes, 1, 2, 3, 4. But you do these quite quickly. Sometimes you only see 1 or 2 of the strokes, but you're also looking to break up this outer edge. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the basic shape that we're aiming for. Sometimes I'll have them upside down, and sometimes I'm just touching them and just see it so that you're only seeing like a little bit of part of a petal. Now I'll bring this up over these flowers, and that'll push these roses back just a little bit. I'll wipe the brush and we'll increase the value in this lighter area, so a little bit more of the titanium white. And I'm going a little bit more precise with my strokes. Now you do want these to overlap. And again, I'm going to increase the value. This time I'm just going to use the titanium white on its own. And again, just a little bit more specific with the shapes. And again, I'm keeping this stronger colour right in the highlight area. Keep wiping and reloading to keep that colour nice and fresh in this lighter area. And I may just touch 1 or 2 that are just peeking out and catching some of that light. Switching back to the round brush now, we'll put a couple of little stamens in the centre of these. So it's into some cadmium yellow, a little bit of oil, and we'll just touch in some of these centres. Now any obvious flowers I'm getting, but once I've got some of the main flowers in, I'm just going to dot this about, and the eye will fill in the rest for you. Isn't that beautiful? Okay, I'm just sitting back and noticing that I'd like to add a little extra row of petals into this white one. Just felt like there was a little bit of too much space there, so just to show you that it can be done at any stage. Just add a few more. Now I'm having a look at this painting and feeling like it's a little unbalanced, and I really do think that an extra flower here will make all the difference. So I'm going to switch back to my old scrubby brush, and we're going to add a nice darkish pink flower here with some alizarin crimson, and again I've just added enough oil to make this nice and thin and nice and creamy. Let's have the shape something like this. Now this is the bravery test. We will scrub that colour in there, just enough oil so this is nice and thin. So I'm looking for a nice shape. Now I'm going to clean that excess paint off, and into some alizarin crimson I'm going to add just the least bit of that black in there to darken it up. And we'll get that nice dark centre in there. So this is just like a refresher on everything we've done so far. The dark centre goes in, and then we fan that out in the direction of the flower. Just a bit more black to that. And we'll pop in some dark at the bottom here. Now I'm going to switch to the chisel brush and some sap green and alizarin, and we'll put in a little bit of a stem coming up, and then we'll back it up, and that gives it the effect of it's been cut off. And we'll add a small little leaf coming off there. Now before I go and highlight the petals, I just want to go back to my scrubby brush and add a little bit of a shadow underneath. So this is all just recap now. So always remember that if this is touching the surface of the table, it would be casting a shadow. And then underneath here, and then we will just soften those edges right out. I'll switch to a soft blending brush for that, and just to soften those edges. Right, I'm going to clean off the chisel brush now, the flat, and we're going to begin adding these petals. So into some titanium white with some alizarin crimson, and again remember the consistency, that this is nice and creamy, no resistance. And we'll start creating these petals. Notice the direction of the strokes. We'll put another row in. We'll create some of these foreshortened petals. And then we'll bring these back petals in the skirts. And we'll put another row in there. Just increase the light just a little bit with some titanium white, and we'll highlight one or two areas just to make them stand out a little bit more. And possibly another little row of petals in there. Finally, we will put the stamens back in. So again, this is just recap on everything we've done so far. A couple of little stamens in with the alizarin crimson, some of the cadmium yellow, and a little bit of titanium white. Okay, again, I like to stand back and have a look, and I would like to highlight a couple of these leaves. So I'm going to use some cadmium yellow, and I'm going to add a little touch of sap green in it so it's not too bright. And again, just a little bit of oil to give it a nice creamy mix. And we'll stand back and I'll highlight a couple of these leaves now, just to bring them forward a little bit. Let's do, and this also increases the separation from one leaf to the next. You can put a little bit of something in there. I mean, there wasn't even a leaf in there, now there is. And this just finishes off. Don't go crazy with your highlights, it's easy to overdo it. And this is why I like to sort of stand back and just take the overall view of the painting in and just pop in one or two of those highlights. A couple of veins on there. Now I also like to do a little bit of a shadow light, and for that I'm going to go back to the cerulean blue mix. Again, not on everything, but we might just have a little bit of this blue reflecting into some of these leaves. Again, it's just another excuse to add a little bit of colour. Let's bring this one forward. And I'm thinking that's finished. It looks pretty good to me. Okay, so that's polka dot and posies. I really do hope you've enjoyed doing this. I know this isn't the sort of painting that's for everybody. It's a little bit sugar coated, but it's a really nice opportunity to use all these scrumptious colours and really sort of have some fun. It's a very, very playful painting. I certainly have enjoyed teaching it you today, so I hope you've had some fun as well.